This is deep dish, right?
Yeah, but let's get deep.
So I'm going deep on both sides.
Marshall Crawford, welcome to the platform for the first time. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Jerome. I appreciate you having me.
Now, I appreciate you being here, and man, it's always good for me when I'm talking to CEOs and presidents when they're black men.
Yeah.
So just kudos to you, flowers given to you, just from one being able to get to this point of level of executive leadership, and then just the work that you've been able to do, on a national stance in housing, finance, and all those things, man. So I just want to congratulate you and just thank you for being who you are.
Well, let me tell you, bro, believe me, I'm still amazed that I'm here at this point in my life, man. It was a long journey.
Yeah.
Long journey. People can't even imagine the toils that I had to go through in order to get to this place. So I'm very humbled that somebody actually wanted to hire me to be in this space, man.
Yeah.
So I'm very honored, man.
Yeah, and I want to go straight into the journey. Like, I want to go straight into that point to, you're in affordable housing, you're in this funding housing, on different levels.
Yeah.
Is it something that you went through your journey that really made housing connect with you?
Mm-hmm.
Or did you experience something indirectly through somebody else in your life that really made that say, hey, this is the lane, this is the sector that's for me?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I went to school at Western Kentucky University, and it wasn't until I did my senior thesis on disparities in mortgage lending that I really got a full understanding of what housing really meant in this country.
Yeah.
And so the thesis focused on, okay, here we are in Kentucky. Why do whites have housing and why do blacks and Hispanics and other people of color not have it? So when I presented, the thesis to my instructor, he was like, that would be a very interesting study to do.
Yeah.
And I majored in finance, so I started really getting a full understanding of finance and what it meant to have life insurance policies, 401ks and all this. But housing continued to be the primary source for most Americans and how they build their wealth. So I wanted to study it.
Yeah.
And so my professor was like, go for it. So I did. And what I realized from that, the truth that came out of that is that with mortgage lending, there are rules and there are exceptions to rules.
Yeah.
And for African American and Hispanics, they were only always told the rules. Whites were always told the rules and the exceptions to the rules. And if you look at the home ownership rates today, whites are, almost 75% of eligible whites to obtain home ownership achieve home ownership, where African Americans are around 44%. Hispanics have climbed up quite a bit to about 49 to 50% of home ownership. So as I studied that, I was like, man, this is amazing. Then I started thinking about my family history and where we were going.
Yeah.
My mom never owned a home. I was like, this is crazy. We moved around all the time.
Yeah.
She never owned a home. And then I went to live with my dad. And my dad owned a home. In fact, my dad had an in-ground swimming pool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is very interesting of the dynamics. But I never gave it any thought until after I did the senior thesis.
Wow.
I was 26 years old doing a thesis in college.
Yeah.
And I'm like, home ownership is critical. So I really became enthused in learning a lot more about home ownership. And then I became a mortgage loan officer here in Nashville for SunTrust Bank to really get ingrained in what is this really all about.
Right.
And I put a lot of people in homes, did a lot of mortgages. And even today now, as I think about home ownership, the reason I promote it so much is because it is still the number one source of wealth creation for Americans.
And so you mentioned that 45% of African Americans today have home ownership. And I think that's crazy because I think that's the same percentage that goes back to like 1968 as well. And so you see, black folks today are more educated, right? We're making more money. make wealth and making more money is kind of different things. But we're making more money, but home ownership is the same rate. We still not. That's systemically. What have you seen that is keeping Black folks specifically at that number? What other groups are able to kind of scale up or stay, at a high rate of homeownership?
There are still these systemic issues that we have to deal with. Yeah. So let me come back to the systemic issue. Let me talk about our issue and our problem.
Right.
First and foremost, we don't believe. We don't believe, and then we don't seek out the right level of education that will give us some perspective about we have this opportunity to own. Right. When you say, yeah, we're more educated, we're educated about the wrong things. We're not educated about the financial aspect of things.
Right.
That's what we need to be more educated about. We've been conditioned to think about things totally different.
Right.
In the way, because you're right, the homeownership rate hasn't. Actually, it has fluctuated. The problem is that when it was fluctuating, we were getting put into the wrong products. Interest-only products.
Yeah.
Adjustable rate mortgages.
Yeah.
All of these things that are good to get you in, but it isn't necessarily, if you don't do the things that you need to do, it's not going to keep you in.
Right.
So you just think about it. You get an adjustable rate mortgage. Right. It's a fixed rate for 4 years. Then on that 5th year, it's going to adjust. Well, it's going to adjust.
Right.
5th year, 6th year,
right.
7th year, 8th year,
right.
up to a certain point.
Right.
What did you do
right.
to adequately prepare you to put yourself in a position to refinance?
Right.
But when you buy a home, what did you do? You ran out, you bought all this furniture, you bought a brand new car, you got all of these things. And then your credit and your income wasn't allowing you to sustain yourself to be able to refinance out of that.
Yeah.
So our education is just still the miseducation.
Yeah.
And we're not getting the education that we need to put us in a very good position.
Yeah. Just
had a conversation with somebody just the other day where they got a 2% interest rate. And because they have a co-owner on that mortgage, the co-owner is like, okay, I'm ready to get out of this. Now, she's going to refinance from a 2% interest rate to a 7% interest rate?
Yeah.
Who does that? The miseducation. Well, the only way you can get out of somebody not being on that mortgage with you is by refinancing. Right. So there's so much miseducation that continues to plague us because of who we're talking to.
Right.
You go to your cousin, or you heard somebody having a conversation that they saw something on NBC or something like that, MSNBC. But those aren't the right people to have the conversations with. Yeah. There are mortgage loan officers, there are realtors that can give you a holistic perspective if you want that. Right. And we don't trust enough people to give us the right information. And that's our biggest problem on why our home ownership rate continues to lag. Yeah. We want to buy in the wrong communities. We want to buy for the wrong reasons. Young people now want to buy a size house that they grew up in that their mom and dad had. Right. They don't want to do a starter home. What's a starter home? Believe me, it's hard to find those things because most people are keeping those homes that they bought and use them as rental income. Right. But they don't want to start in these starter situations. They want to go straight to the top. Right. Now, that's the issue that we have. Right. But the other side of that is the systemic issue that we continue to deal with. Yeah. The underwriting criteria and everything that's associated with it. Yep, you decided you got out, you went to college. Well, guess what? You got all this debt now. Yeah. So how is that going to allow you to be able to get a house? Right. If your debt is greater than your income. Right. So we're already cost burdened by those particular issues, and underwriting doesn't look at in a very favorable way. Look at it in a very favorable way. So you still have the systemic underwriting criteria that still looks at keeping certain people out of proper situations. Yeah. Then again, we want to buy in certain communities, and then that underwriting criteria isn't going to lie for you to be able to buy in that community or at that level that you can afford. Yeah. And so it also has a problem. So there are two sides of that fence. Yeah. There is the corporate side of the lending side, but there's also the homeowner or the individual side
Yeah.
that doesn't manage and do things the right way that will allow them to achieve home ownership, because debt is a critical situation. You gotta manage your debt load
Right.
in order to match your income level
Right.
to be able to put yourself in a good position to purchase, if you can purchase today. Because the economic environment now for home ownership is vastly different than what it used to be.
So what do people do? Say I want a house, I want
Yeah.
a home, right? Maybe I was raised in a low economic area. I maybe was in a house.
Yeah.
I was in a house, but now I'm an adult, but I want to get a home. I want to kind of get in a healthy environment, maybe have a family or something like that. But I really don't make a livable wage. I do have debt from college or credit cards. And I really don't have any kind of generational knowledge in general on how to, get to the next level, right? I don't even have access, right? And nobody's coming to me and saying, hey, like, we want to help you get into a home. What can those type of community members do to get to that next level, or get to a point to where they can trust somebody that looks like them, or maybe don't look like them, to kind of guide them on saying, hey, here's some, kind of financial literacy or some housing literacy that'll help you get to that next step? Because I feel like those are the most impacted, don't have access. And a lot of times you hear, like, meet people where they are. Well, a lot of times that don't happen.
Absolutely. You know what they do have access to? A phone.
Yep.
And if you got access to a phone, guess what you got access to? The internet.
Right.
If you got access to the internet, guess what you got access to? Information.
Right.
If you got access to information, then guess what you can do? You can change your circumstances if you commit to the information, if you commit to utilizing those access.
Right.
So I know what people say, we don't have access. Everybody has smartphones these days.
Yeah.
You got access. We got a program called eHome America, where you can go online and you can take a homebuyer education class. No one is going to bother you.
Right.
You can self-pace. You can go through it as much and really get as much education as you need right from that particular course. We have a online money management course. So you can get a financial understanding if you really want to. Then, community groups. You were able to get access to me.
Yeah.
You can get access to mortgage loan officers all over the place, man.
Yeah.
You got the Black Chamber of Commerce. You got all these places where you can find those individuals say, we need somebody to come and talk about home ownership.
Right.
We need somebody to come and talk about financial literacy.
Yeah.
If the schools won't have it, the churches should have it.
Do you get requests often in communities that need it most, that are most impacted from not being homeowners or not having generational homeowners? Do you get enough of those calls?
Our organization gets enough of those calls.
Okay.
And the people we know get enough
Okay.
of those calls
Okay.
to be able to come and talk
Okay. That's
and
good.
be in the community and have those discussions. When I first moved back here to Nashville, Noah, I've been to several of those meetings, having discussions, just talking about the home ownership rate and talk about home ownership access and everything here. So there's access to individuals who want to provide information about this, but we just need more of them to be committed and saying, yes, you talk about somebody who, has debt and everything. Well, there's the Financial Empowerment Center.
Yeah.
Get there. A lot of our banking partners have financial literacy programs, online and in person, that you can attend to. You can get anything that you want if you make a commitment to get it.
Yeah.
And if you want to make a commitment to get a job, then you do the things that you need to do to get a job.
Right.
I always say, do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do.
Right.
And those are the type of things, being committed to that type of education, pulling it up, reading it, because if you read a part of it, it's going to spark an interest.
Yeah.
And then you're going to want to read something else.
Yeah.
Then you're going to want to understand something else. Then you're going to call somebody and say, man, hey, I'm not understanding this. Can you help me understand this a little bit further? Then that's going to pique your interest. If you want to achieve home ownership, you can.
Yeah.
I had let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
when I was here back in the late 90s, I had a young brother show up to my office. I was out in Hendersonville. He showed up to my office. He said, "Hey, Marshall, one of your frat brothers told me to connect with you because I need to try to figure out how to buy a house." I said, "Are you in the music industry?" He was like, "Nah, I work for the music industry in providing home ownership opportunities." And he was like, circumstances, car been repossessed, we're living in my mother-in-law's basement, and we don't, I got student loan debt, situations just as we coming, and here I am as a man with a wife and 2 kids. How do I make this circumstance a whole lot better? And he's like, and he told me to come talk to you. And I looked at him and I was like, man, wow, that's interesting. I don't know how I'm gonna help you and so forth, but here's my business card. You know what? Give me a call in a couple weeks and maybe we'll get together. And then I said to him, which I learned, if you do something 7 times, it then becomes a habit.
All right.
So I said, hey man, this is what I want you to do. On your way back, stop by Kroger. They used to have housing magazines in there. Get one of those magazines, you and your wife sit down, take a look at, find a house, and then I want you to make 7 copies of that. I want you to put one on the dashboard of your car, put one on your mirror, do what you need to do, but really pray over it and everything.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah. He looked at me, he was like, yeah, okay, bro. And he walked out and everything, man. I really didn't know anything about affordable housing at that time. I was doing loans for music stars.
Yeah.
And so I had gone down to the bank and I met a gentleman by the name of Denny Marshall. And really just trying to get an understanding of affordable housing, him and the work that he did and everything. And he gave me a little understanding about it. And so I had called the brother about 3 weeks later and said, yo, man, how you doing? He's like, yeah, I'm good. He's like, come on in and see me. So he came in and saw me. And we sat down and we just started talking about circumstances and everything. And I said, let's pull up your credit report. That's what Denny told me, to pull up a soft credit. We started looking at it, started circling some things and everything. And I said, these are things you need to do. Here's who you need to call. This is what you need to do to try to address some of this. And gave it to him. He was like, man, I really appreciate that. And then he stood up. And I stood up. We shook hands. And then he was like, oh, by the way, pulls out his wallet, takes a picture of the house that he made 7 copies of that him and his wife said, this is the house we want.
Wow. So he did that.
He did that. And guess what I did? I started investing in him a whole lot more, man.
Yeah.
And eventually was able to help him get in a situation, not immediately, but eventually he ended up getting a mortgage, getting his circumstances different, and then him and his wife were able to buy a house, man.
Yeah.
Talk about powerful.
Yeah.
That's some deep stuff right there.
Yeah.
He was committed to it. I was able to give him the information because I saw that he was committed.
Right.
But initially, I couldn't give him information I didn't have.
Yeah.
So I had to go learn a little bit. Now look what I'm doing here. I am today, almost 30 years later, man, doing something that is helping other people get into home ownership.
Commitment is a word I want to kind of focus on.
Yeah.
When we talk about affordable housing, commitment. Nashville, we know we're in an affordable housing crisis, right? Yeah. Which intersects with our unhoused population.
Yep.
Right. How committed do you believe Nashville is? And this is gonna be on any type of level you want to address it on, to combating our affordable housing crisis that I think directly affects our unhoused population as well. Yeah. How do you feel our commitment has been so far as a city since you've been back? And I know you've been head of the housing fund since 2017.
Correct.
And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the unhoused is a very difficult situation,
right?
Because there are so many systemic issues that play into why people are unhoused.
Right.
It ain't always just financial.
Right.
There's mental capacity.
Right.
There's so many other elements that go into that, that in order to house those particular individuals, you also got to have the various social services that actually to address that situation. From what I see, what I read, what I hear, there is a certain level of commitment. There are a number of organizations that are committed to the unhoused.
Right.
The housing fund, it's difficult for us because of where we serve and where we get our resources, that we are more of a part of the ecosystem that serves that 80%, 100%, 120%. But what I've seen is the city making significant progress, whether it's the Barnes Fund, now there's this Catalyst Fund about preservation. There are corporate partners being committed, like Amazon and their commitment to the housing fund, and so many other organizations out there that are trying to build and create and preserve affordable housing. So I do see, since 2017, an increased efforts across the board, nonprofit and for-profit entities, Black-owned and majority-owned. Everybody trying to do their part. People always ask me, how do we solve the problem? It's difficult to solve the problem because the problem is an income problem. When you think about it, affordable housing is an income problem. It's about what somebody can afford and what somebody wants to sell it or rent it for. Because what they're selling and renting for, guess where that money goes? To their income.
Exactly.
Everything, affordable housing, everything is about an income problem. So how do you address the income problem for the people that have jobs or don't have enough income? How do you address that particular issue? Because then the people that do own are saying basically, you know what, I'm renting this property because it subsidized my income, my retirement income.
Exactly.
And so all of that is a situation that, how can you solve a housing issue if it's all based off of income? Unless you address the income issue, it's almost impossible to solve the problem. But it is definitely opportunities for us to be able to address the problem. Housing Fund has been around since 1996. And you know why it was created? Because there was an affordable housing crisis in Nashville.
And we still have one.
And we still have one to this day. Because what haven't we been able to address? Incomes.
Okay, now that's an interesting take. Because I haven't heard anybody really point out the lack of income that is preventing people to getting to housing. Are those conversations being had between city and housing and corporations that are giving people jobs? And we hear this livable wage thing. How is all that interconnected for what you do in your space to help combat this affordable housing issue and essentially also help people not be unhoused?
So let me tell you this. Income is personal. When I apply, no one knows how much money that I make. I mean, they may, but the thing is, they didn't have that conversation with me and say, hey, bro, how much money you make? And no one's going to ask you how much money you make. It is very personal. So all of income, whether on both sides of the spectrum, is a very personal situation. No, they're not having. You got to have that conversation with whoever your employer is or however you generate your income because it's very personal. So no one is going to sit back and say, oh, you know what? The CEOs of these companies are not making enough income. Or, the waiters and waitresses of these, they're not making enough income. Even though we may think CEOs are overpaid and think waitresses and waiters are underpaid, it's still all an income and it's still very personal.
I got a scenario for you. This is even like a personal scenario too, right? You have individuals in Nashville, just not in Nashville, all the world, right, that will pay $1,200, $1,400, $1,500, $1,800 a month in rent, right? But some of these individuals as well feel like, hey, I can pay this, but I can't afford or I don't qualify to get a house. What suggestions or what are maybe some avenues if I can afford to pay $1,500 a month for 2 years straight, no missed rent payments? but I can't qualify for a house because I still lack the income from the savings, and the responsibilities is a little different. If something breaks, I'm held accountable for it, and not the property. How does that work? Because I think many people are in that situation where they can make that rent, you know, and if something happens to the refrigerator, they can call the landlord like, hey, the refrigerator's messed up, need a replacement, right? But a mortgage is a little bit different, even though the income may be the same of what you need to pay. The responsibility that you need to have, that extra money, that extra emergency for whatever happens is a little different, which I think scares people off from even trying, because like I don't have the down payment, the $5,000 to $10,000 or whatever, but I can make this rent every month though.
Yeah, and you make a very good point, and you are absolutely right. There are people out there that can make their rent on time, able to pay that. So but there are opportunities out there like down payment assistance and closing costs. The challenge that we have is if someone lives, let's say 1818 Church in that apartment complex and paying $1,600 a month and can do that very consistently, where can they find near 1818 Church or within that vicinity a house that is going to be a $1,600 house or a mortgage payment that they can be able to buy?
I know 7% is whatever the interest rate.
Absolutely. Even at 2%, where you're still going to find the cost of a house in that particular area.
No.
So where the individuals that you're talking about, and most time when we think about this, especially in downtown Nashville, people want to live in downtown.
Yeah.
They want to live in downtown.
Yeah.
And the thing is that if you want to live in downtown and you want to buy a house, what type of house are you buying?
Yeah.
So supply and demand is still a very critical aspect of it when you try to compare, oh, you're paying this rent.
Right.
You can pay for a house like this.
Yeah.
But guess where you're going to find that house that is less than that rent payment and so forth? Probably in Clarksville, Spring Hill, or, you know, all of these places.
But Marshall, we don't want to move. We don't want to leave.
Okay, well, there's your issue, bro. There's your issue, is that there isn't enough housing. And we know, like I know, East Nashville was all affordable housing.
Yeah.
North Nashville was all affordable housing.
Yeah.
All of these places had affordable housing. And when I say affordable, meaning it was affordable to certain income levels.
Right.
But what did I just say? In 1996, the Housing Fund was created because there was an affordable housing crisis here.
Right.
Even those homes over there and so forth. Now look what they're going for.
Is it still true that, does it still hold true that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income, you know, on housing?
So, man, you know, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, did you research to determine when that number was created?
I did not research.
1962. HUD came up with that numerator to determine that no one should spend more than 30% of their income or they will be considered cost burden.
Yeah.
Do you know what most back-end ratios are and everything these days to get people to qualify for the housing fund? Our back-end ratio is 43%, I think it is. 43% to be able to get you in there.
Right.
VA loan goes up to 43%.
Wow.
So a lot of these, that number is outdated.
Right.
Because to be perfectly honest, the majority of us are paying over 30% of our income on housing. Because housing isn't just about your mortgage.
Right.
It's about your transportation. It's about your food. It's about your utilities. All of that stuff, man. And so, again, what I will tell people is that if you're trying to qualify for a mortgage, you got to figure out what that mortgage company or what that bank has from a mortgage standpoint in terms of their back-end ratio.
Yeah.
You know, and most of the time it's just one ratio. Rules and exceptions to rules. Front-end ratio back in the day used to be 26% and 36%. Well, you don't qualify because you don't meet those ratios. The exceptions to the rules, down payment assistance and closing costs, paying off or getting a gift from a homeowner, from a relative or somebody. Exceptions to the rules. But when you only know the rules, it stops you from being able to think creatively or working with somebody who can help you think creatively about how you can achieve home ownership. So that 30% is still very much a reality according to HUD and everybody else. Their reality. But we know the reality in the marketplace is totally different.
So if I'm in Nashville now or Middle Tennessee, we'll focus on Nashville in general, and I want to stay here, right? You know, I'm bringing in, you know, 60,000 or whatnot, and I want to stay here and I want to get a house at some point. Do I need to be looking to make more income at some point in time? Or should I just be like, hey, like maybe Clarksville or Springfield, Murfreesboro may be better options? Or does it come to a point to where the housing market, the pricing just continues going up, where those markets as well is going to be about the same? Where do you project this going for Nashvillians?
I'll tell you, man, there are some creative options out there. You know, for us, we have what is known as a shared equity program, in which an individual brings 1% to the table. They get a first mortgage for 74%. Then the housing fund invests 25%. What happens there is you make a decision that I will share my appreciation with the housing fund, who will sustain this property when I sell it at an affordable rate. Creative options out there. The other part of that is looking for those creative opportunities. Down payment assistance and closing costs. Creative opportunities. The biggest thing about the housing stock is that what I said earlier, you know, a lot of times people are looking at location, where they want to live, where they want to be. And today, it's difficult to look at location. So I tell them, do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. Most people are buying houses and they're thinking about that's the only house they're ever going to buy. Instead of saying, okay, you know what, this ain't the house that I want to be in for the rest of my life. So, but let me acquire it. If this is what I can afford right now, let me get this house. And then let me go ahead and figure out what the future looks like. You know, so let's not look so far into the future is what would be my advice. Let's say, hey, what can I get in right now? And then I'll worry about the future and I'll worry about tomorrow. But let me do what I need to do. It ain't just necessarily about how much income. It's also about your debts. It's also about what you're saving. It's also about what you're willing to sacrifice right now. Home ownership, getting into home ownership was about sacrifice. Today, nobody wants to sacrifice anything. They just want to jump in and they want to get it and they want to get it now. But man, you know what? Okay, I'm not going out to eat. For the next 6 months, I'm going to save this amount of money and put it in this account. And I'm going to do these things because I need to save money. I'm not taking on any new credit card debt. I'm not taking on any, you know, I'm a getting my hair done. I mean, do all of these things. I'm going to let it grow out. You know what? Because I don't want to spend $50. It costs $50 for me to get a haircut now. For sure. I'm going to hold off on these things. Sacrifice. And if they're able to make these sacrifices, then they can adjust and they can deal with the income. Dude, I'm a CEO. I still got 2 jobs. I referee high school basketball. You know, there are other opportunities of being able to increase your income level. And that's what I think is important. That we make those sacrifices to get what we need, and then we do what we got to do until we can do what we want to do.
Socially, what do you hear that you feel like maybe misinformation or maybe not all the way to blame on the lack of affordability of housing? Do you hear anything socially? And I think one of the most top tier example is the unhoused, our homelessness population. Like, hey, if we had more affordable housing, then we can kind of eradicate, you know, homelessness in a way. But you know, I think it's maybe 50-50 with like you have people who don't have the income, and then it's like people have other kind of social service needs that probably prevent them from being able to even hold a job or disabled. These other things, it's more nuanced than just like there's not affordable housing. Like, you know, they can't even get income or can't really sustain a normal job because of their mental health or whatever it be. Is there anything else that you maybe hear when you talking to community, or did you feel like, hey, like, we get it, we knew more affordable housing, but affordable housing is maybe not the direct cause of all of these other things that may intersect with maybe if people had housing, it could maybe make a better life for them?
Yeah, I'll tell you the biggest misconception is that we need to build more new affordable housing. That's the biggest misconception.
Okay.
Because we also need to preserve the current affordable housing stock that we do have.
Do we ever catch up though? That's my thing. That's
it's
my
a
thing.
Population issue.
Yeah, it's like, do we ever catch up? Because what we need, like 50,000 units? But it's like, it take time to build those 50,000 units. And as time goes
But who came up with that number?
From the city.
Yeah. Based on what?
Yeah.
The number of people that are moving in?
Yeah.
But what about the people that already live here?
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the unhoused, you're not talking about people that are moving here to become unhoused.
Right.
You're talking about people that are already here.
Yeah.
So again, it ain't about just building. It's about sustaining.
Yeah.
There's a lot of units out there that used to be affordable that are no longer affordable.
What's considered affordable now, too?
Well, it all depends.
Okay.
It all depends. What we're talking about affordable, we're talking about how much do you pay in rent?
Yeah.
And what is considered affordable in rent?
Yeah.
And HUD sets that parameters.
Okay.
Or based on area median income.
Okay. And so that's what
it is.
And so, and I've seen some crazy area median income numbers in Nashville.
Yeah.
Right? It's like $85,000 is like what you would need in the Davidson County, like the inner city.
For a family of four.
Yeah.
For a family of four.
Yeah.
For a family of four. So if you make $40,000 and your wife makes $40,000, that's $80,000 right there.
Exactly.
Right? And then you have two kids.
Right.
If you want to live in Davidson County, and you know what, I don't know the numbers. Man, you know how many numbers I have in my head. Those area median income numbers, I don't. They're on our website.
Yeah.
For those who are listening out there, you can find those numbers. But HUD makes the adjustments and determines this.
Yeah.
It's not the housing fund that does this.
Right.
It's HUD, based on what you asked me earlier. 30% of your income should be X, Y, and Z. So then when you go out and try to get an affordable mortgage and down payment assistance, it's all based on area median income. And so we put a whole lot of stock in area median income. And I heard someone say, you know, before, just talking about the Hispanic community, you got several families living in one household. Yeah. So the trouble that they have is that, again, if you have so many families living in there, you got to take all those families into consideration.
Yeah.
Why isn't it just the wage earner?
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about the VA loan, it simply could be, it's just the wage earner.
Yeah.
And they're on the mortgage.
Yeah.
But you still got a family who's going to live in there, but it's just that person who's committed to that particular mortgage. Why doesn't HUD rethink that?
Yeah.
Or reconsider that?
Yeah.
I think it could open up the doors for so many more people becoming homeowners.
Right.
And getting these assistance.
Right.
Or are they designed to ensure that it's not?
Right.
You know, these all the things that you have to look at. So when you talk about what else is out there, it's these type of things that also create the chaos around what is affordable and what's not affordable, who can achieve it and who doesn't achieve it, the housed versus the unhoused, and the different dynamics associated with that when it comes to income levels.
So population, Nashville, 80 people are still moving here a day.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. What do we do with that, especially from a housing market? Because those 80 people a day are coming here, you know, moving into a home. They ain't just coming here just. They got some type of housing available to them if they move in here.
Yeah, well, you see.
Yeah.
Have you seen all the apartments and everything that they're built?
So they moving somewhere, in there, right? And so for the people that are here, it's like, okay, like what are we gonna do here? What am I doing here? Like what's gonna happen?
And that's the challenge that we have. The people that are already here. Yeah. Another program that we created in partnership with Amazon is the Housing Resiliency Fund. So again, we're trying to preserve the current stock.
Yeah.
So imagine somebody owns their home and property taxes are increasing because of all of the stuff that has been built around them. Well, if they're on a fixed income and property taxes is going up, how are they offsetting that and how are they able to match that?
Yeah.
So the Housing Fund, along with Amazon, created the Housing Resiliency Fund where we're offsetting their property tax.
Yeah.
What is that money? That money is contributing to their income.
Right.
We're helping on income factors. You asked earlier about income.
Right.
Well, the resources that we garner and we get from our investors and from our partners, we're helping offset some of that income so they can sustain their home ownership opportunities in Davidson County.
Yeah.
And that's a critical factor to all of this because the people that currently live here have to also, we cannot leave them behind.
Yeah.
You know, and help them preserve if they want to stay here. Yeah, we can build all of these new high rises and everything. You got all the young people moving in here, you know, they don't have a whole lot of debt or they're getting roommates.
Yeah.
You know, and so they are willing to make the sacrifice of having a roommate.
Yeah.
So I don't have to pick up that cost. And now what, $1,600 has become $800 for them.
Yeah.
And if they knew that they could spend $1,600 on their own, that $800 is going in the bank.
Should.
Absolutely, to allow them to start saving and being mindful of these type of things.
Sometimes people are too prideful to ask for help. And I'm curious, do you run into that or have you seen that of people who may be high earners, right? But they don't manage money well. And they don't want to come to Marshall and say, Marshall, look, man, I'm terrible with my finances. I make $80,000, but you know I just can't save nothing, or I got more going out than I do got coming in, but I'm trying to get a home. Do you run into that when you have people who really can can maybe qualify or get help that they need, but just don't want to ask or just too embarrassed to ask for help when it comes to housing?
Yeah, those individuals don't show up at the housing fund.
Right.
You know when I run into those individuals?
Where?
When I'm out at Brick Tops having a drink or something, or when I'm hanging out at Urban Grove or something like that, and they find out, that's when those conversations are had behind closed doors or in private settings. They're not showing up at the housing fund saying, hey, this is happening or that is happening. Hopefully they're going other places to get that information, but it's not until we spark a conversation saying, man, I'm struggling with this. What advice would you give me?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I appreciate you asking these questions because you either did your homework or you're really curious about this.
Both.
Okay, good. So we're coming up with an asset protection program.
Okay.
And what it is how do we help existing individuals that are homeowners get the rehab done on their home? But at the same time, they got to subscribe to be a part of a financial planning aspect of it. Because while your house is a major asset, you also are a major asset.
Right.
Do you have life insurance? Do you have a will? Do you have a trust?
Yeah.
Do you have a financial plan
to
really help you with those things? So we're trying to do the financial planning and wealth protection side of things, in addition to just helping preserve home ownership opportunities. For those brothers and sisters out there who essentially say, hey, you know what? I just can't. I have income, but I just can't do it. Man, you got to find, there's financial institutions that have wealth management programs.
Yeah.
Again, if you got a phone, pull it up, man. Yeah. I send information out all the time.
Yeah.
I was recently ran into a wealth planner at a financial institution wrote a book. Yeah. And he sent me a copy. And the title of it, and his name is Trey Smith, so I'm giving him a little plug because I thought the book was really titled well. Yeah. Money does grow on trees. Family trees. And it was really around wealth protection and being mindful of all of this. Yeah. And that's what people have to start thinking about, the family tree. Yeah. And how do I get the information? There's information out there. Just read up and start. Again, it's about sacrificing. Yeah. You're saying, hey, then why are you sitting here at Urban Grove about to spend $100? Yeah. on a daggone meal
Yeah.
when you're telling me you're having a tough time doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Dude, get on here. Let me buy you a drink. Let me invest that in you. Now go home and figure out, hey, let me eat some ramen noodles for the next 3 weeks so I can save this money and so forth.
Yeah.
We're not willing to make those sacrifices. And we got to make those type of sacrifices to get what we want.
What sacrifices do you see Nashville needs to make around putting a dent in some of this affordable housing and anything that maybe intersects with that? We got a new vice mayor, we got a new mayor as well. What do you think some things, because we're a mayor-led city, so let's focus on that mayoral administration. What things could possibly the mayor may have to sacrifice?
They got to check their egos at the door first and foremost. This ain't about them.
Yeah.
It's about the city.
Right.
And that's critical. And knowing who's coming in. He's a very humble guy. I've met him on several occasions. But, the problem I think that we have is an ego problem here. We want to be seen as something.
Right.
Take your pick.
Yeah.
Music City.
Right.
A sports town or whatever. And we got to check those egos. And that's where we got to sacrifice that ego to say, hey, you know what? Let's make sure that we have the services that we need to help the unhoused.
Right.
Let's make sure that we have the services that we need to help the housed that are cost burdened.
Right.
Let's make sure that we have the resources that we need to be able to fund the nonprofits who are willing to do the work out there. Let's check our egos at the door from the corporate standpoint. Yeah. And where are the corporations investing and putting money back into? Yeah. These are the sacrifices. Yeah. These are the sacrifices that need to happen in order to have the type of city that everybody keeps saying that we need to be. An equitable city, a diverse city, an inclusionary city. All of these buzzwords sound great and are fine, but until we check our egos at the door and realize that none of us can do it alone, we're going to continue to have these problems. Those are the sacrifices that it has to be inclusionary from a standpoint that we're collaborating, that we can help the individuals out there who really need the help. When I was an undergrad, Dr. Milana Karinga, the creator of African American Celebration Kwanzaa, told me that the basic justification of higher education is to enhance your social competence so you can make a more significant contribution to society. Yeah. At the time he told me that, I had no idea what that meant. But it's about socializing. It's about who we connect to and how we connect to individuals that are going to allow us to be able to make, the impact that we want to have. Yeah. And that's what we got to do. We got to become a more social community that allows us to connect with one another, that allows us to make that more significant contribution. That's the sacrifice that has to happen. None of me, all of us. Right. Check our egos at the door.
You mentioned something that earlier about around housing, about rehabbing homes, and kind of that wealth assessment. And I'm curious because you were here during the tornado.
I was.
And I'm curious on your take on once you have something like a national disaster happens in North Nashville or East Nashville, or just historically local thriving communities that that have been there for generations, and then a tornado comes, right? Then you have these predatory investors in a city like Nashville. It's like, hey, you don't have that wealth management, that wealth assessment. You haven't been we can come take that off your hands. What are your thoughts about that process? And I guess homeowners being that vulnerable to something like that happening to them. And how do we combat that from happening in the future? I think even nationally, like in Hawaii, when they had their big national disaster, they were saying that was happening. They was getting families like, hey, you just been, everything is burnt down, it's gone. Like we can take this off. How do we how do we stop that, or what can families do to say, hey, Marshall, like this is it, like where do you see that support coming from, and no kind of barriers to that support?
So there's two issues that you're dealing with. Number one is the lack of education, or the miseducation. The other thing is a need.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about it. A tornado happened.
Yeah.
House was
demolished. Yeah.
Or it was just damaged.
Yeah.
And the individual didn't have homeowners insurance because they owned the house outright and they didn't have homeowners insurance. Well, they don't have the education to really understand what should or shouldn't I do. And then on the other side of it, they have a financial need.
Yeah.
And what somebody is catering to is their lack of understanding about finances and solving a problem for them.
Yeah.
The problem is that we got this situation here. Now we need money.
Right.
We don't know what to do. No one is educating. But the person who showed up and knocked on the door said, I can solve this problem for you.
Yeah.
And they're going to put money in your hands. Cash. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do with that if you have the lack of knowledge?
All right. Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah.
You're taking the cash
Like,
because it solves your problem.
In my life.
It's the same thing, man. When you look at the houses that are down there and somebody says, hey, I'm willing to give you $350,000 for that house. Yeah. And you bought it for $75,000 back in 1972.
Yeah.
And somebody wants to give you $350,000 for it.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Woo.
Man, but then where do you go?
Right.
Where do you go? Then what do you do?
Right.
Do you have somebody who offsets is going to be able to say, yeah, you can come live with us?
Right.
Because cash evaporates.
Yeah.
If you lack knowledge of what to do with it. Because
Right.
you're going to go out and buy a car,
a
liability.
Yeah.
You're going to go out and do this. I mean,
you got to get another home.
You got to get another home. Where are you going to live?
Not for $300.
And then if you go and you get an apartment or you get something that you're renting, it's eating up your cash.
Right, exactly.
It's eating up your cash. So you ask them, so what do we do? You have to become more educated. It was great to see so many community organizers saying, don't sell out, don't sell in the community and everything. But I would like to know, what was that impact? How many people didn't?
Yeah.
And then when you had so many that were renters living in that and it happened, those property owners didn't care about you renting.
Right.
They're either selling their unit and getting out of that and moving on, or they're going to fix it and then they're going to jack up the rent on you.
Right, yeah.
They're going to jack up the rent. So to think, what do? It has to be about education.
Yeah.
Again, commitment from the city, preserving, locking that down. No one can do this, or no one can sell, no one can do this until they go through a financial assessment or they get the education that they need, and making sure. But it's a free country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people will say, no, we don't want the city to incorporate program that have them having to go through some counseling or some guidance before they decide to sell their property. It's my property. I know exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. So why would I have somebody doing that? It's a hard balancing act of being able to stop that. When you own what you own, you want to do what you want to do with it.
Exactly. Have you seen some cities that have been where Nashville is at now and have been able to kind of correct the neglect, I should say, and be able to get ahead of the crises that they faced?
I don't think we've ever seen the type of crisis that we're dealing with property values at the highest level that they are, and our society so built around capitalism, and everybody wanting to maximize, their rate of return on this. We haven't seen this before like we've seen it now, man. There is so much money in the economy. There's so much money in people's hands that we haven't seen this. And for cities, man, they're all struggling. I don't care what city you talk about. Philly, DC, Baltimore, Austin, Portland, LA. Just think about Charlotte, Atlanta. All these cities are struggling with this, man. Why? We all got the same education.
Yeah.
You know, we've all been around. We've all been able to see this.
Yeah.
What are we doing? We're basically passing off best practices and figuring out, hey, I can do this, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But guess who's winning out in every city? The for-profit,
Yeah.
private investors.
Yeah.
Those with capital win out every day, all day.
So, what's our hope, man? give us some optimism.
There is optimism. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about the lack of affordable housing and
Yeah.
everything. You know, there's a lot of housing that is still affordable.
Yeah.
It's just that people don't want that housing.
The location.
And they don't want the location. They don't want the circles. Because there isn't a transit. I don't want to deal with traffic. Everybody comes up with an excuse.
Yeah.
There's housing out there.
Yeah.
We're buying housing all the time.
Yeah.
You know, Madison, we just bought a new building in Madison
Yeah.
and renovated it. It was a check cashing place. We turned it into our headquarters.
Yeah.
People were like, man, how you like driving out to Madison? Well, I'm going against traffic.
Yeah.
Man, I don't have any problems with that. But they're like, man, but these are the things. Everybody
Yeah.
has their own opinion
Yeah.
about what the issue is.
Right.
And dealing with those struggles is that there's housing there. And there are organizations that are doing a phenomenal job in being able to address a lot of this.
Economically, you're a finance guy. I'm an econ guy. And so I'm curious on your thoughts of like, okay, say Nashville just keep becoming more expensive, right? And those incomes from the employees here stay the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see people say, okay, I'm going to Clarksville. I'm going to Springfield. Not only is not, I'm going to move out there, I'm going to start working out there.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect Nashville as an economic city to where now you're going to have people that may be from here or move here and say, this is ridiculous. I'm going to move to these other cities where I can get a similar paying job and it's less expensive. Does that turn Nashville into just, okay, I'm coming down to play? Does that hurt our economy? What does that do?
I think the Nashville economy helps all the rest of the economies around.
Okay.
It helps.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Nashville is saying, hey,
Even if people stop living here.
but people are going to stop living here. I mean, the jobs are here. This
Yeah.
is where the entertainment is here.
Yeah.
They're still coming back for the Titans games, the Predator games, everybody, which is a good thing. I mean, the economics of it all is that this is the major city. Just think about Atlanta.
Yeah.
The city of Atlanta is 600,000 people.
Yeah.
It's everything around Atlanta that has been built out, but it still makes Atlanta what it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing that's happening here is that Nashville is still going to be what it is.
Yeah.
The football teams, the sports teams, the music, the entertainment, the people that visit,
Yeah.
tourism is huge. The conferences that come here,
Yeah.
all of that is huge. It's going to feed into it.
Yeah.
The people that live around, again, that is making the rest of the areas
Right.
that more economically vibing.
Right.
And guess what it also does? It also just feeds into Nashville.
Right.
So instead of looking at it as a negative, it's like, I know if I was the mayor of some of these other cities, I'd be like, all right, let me figure out how I take care of my affordable housing issue.
Yeah.
Or how I can make sure that I'm bringing some of these businesses here. We're protecting our small businesses.
Yeah.
All of those type of things. I think it's a win for everybody if we look at it from that lens instead of looking at it from a negative lens.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that we have our challenge is around transit.
Yeah.
You know, that's huge. There's just nothing that is carrying people from point A to point B
Right.
other than a car.
Right. In which people will say that affordability and transit go
Hand in hand.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And right now our transit are cars.
Yeah.
So it's really about, if we're missing anything, how are we not building out the infrastructures of our roads
Yeah.
to allow? And the thing is that, hey, that means more cars are going to be on the road. Well, if you're not going to build the transit,
Yeah.
then at least build the infrastructure to be able to accommodate the cars.
Yeah. What keeps you going? What keeps you at this and passionate about helping community members get into housing, helping nonprofits and businesses be able to get capital to build affordable housing. What keeps you going, man? I know it's a lot. I know we just talked to you. So you said it's only Tuesday, it feel like Friday. But what keeps you going? What keeps you motivated? What keeps you, with your boots to the ground and just ear to the streets to keep doing this work?
Yeah, well, my partners or investors said, man, we appreciate the impact that you're continuing to have on the communities and the people that you're serving. When we're able to continue to leverage our resources to garner more resources, and our partners are happy with that. That keeps me motivated, man. I got a great staff, man, that is committed, that is in the community, that are part of, task forces, community groups, offering their voices to this same situation here, man. And we're all talking from the same perspective. How do I utilize the assets of the housing fund to create access for those who either want to be homeowners or those who want to provide, affordable housing options. That keeps me motivated. How do I look at our assets and create access? Because so much of it, when you talk about Black developers and you talk about Black businesses, it was always about we don't have access. So my thing is that, okay, how can I put myself in the position to allow them to have access to capital? And being able to serve the community that we want them to serve. Affordable housing units, whether single family or multifamily. How do we ensure that affordable housing is still being built and preserved and maintained and created in a city that we all live? But we don't just serve Nashville, we serve the entire state. And so I'm just motivated. I was on the phone today with a brother talking about Memphis, talking about some of the development that he's got going on in Memphis. How can he get access to our capital or a partnership to be able to build there? We have projects up in Chattanooga and working in Knoxville and also East Tennessee. All of those things keep me going, man, because again, I simply want to be able to make a more significant contribution to society. And every day when I wake up, I know that here I am managing a $50 million revolving loan fund. I have access to assets that I can make available to others in order to achieve home ownership or either be able to find some affordable housing. And working with developers, working with partners like Amazon, working with the cities, working with the financial institutions who are major investors, and then private donors that continue to invest in us, man. So it keeps me up, it keeps me going. I love what I do. I tell everybody I don't have a job. I have a mission, and this is a ministry for me, man, and being able to do the things that I do.
Well, Marshall, look, I appreciate your time, man. I definitely want to have you back to continue this conversation because I just think the more people that continue to move here constantly needs to understand kind of just where the city is when it comes to just housing, but also what I like about what you do, you literally offer people alternatives. You the exception to the rules, right?
That's right.
You literally have like, hey, okay, this is your situation. Come into the housing fund. Let us see what we're working with, and let's figure out a plan.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what people need to hear. People need to know, and people just need to take advantage of why it's still available. And why there's staff and leadership that wants to help a community here, right? And so now I appreciate what y'all do, but continuously having this conversation and continuously letting people know like there's an organization, there's an entity that you literally can go to, nonprofit, for-profit, individual, family, that you can get some type of support and aid to figure out how can you be a part of getting to housing or be a part of combating the affordable housing crisis here and throughout Tennessee. So,
Absolutely.
man, I appreciate you and everything that you and your staff are doing, for sure.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it, man. And I would just say, again, the Housing Fund can't do it all. So there are so many organizations across this state that actually provide the same type of access to resources as we do. And so I would tell your listeners, man, find one of those agencies and get in front of some of the people that want to help make a difference there,
Yeah.
and you know, and make the sacrifices and do what you have to do until
Right.
you can do what you want to do.
Right. Marshall, man, I appreciate your time, man.
Likewise, bro.
All right, take it
Appreciate
easy.
you. Yep.